Today being the 9th of June of 2025, a lot of events played out in the courtroom today, which will definitely blow your mind. Today's court session happened to be one of the most exciting court sessions we've ever seen in a long time. So the question here is, what really happened? Well, in this video, we shall be explaining and critically analyzing every single thing that happened in the court section today. So the court proceedings kicked off at about 10:20 a.m. The legal counsel team of the both parties were fully present. The court session started by the prosecuting lawyer making an introductory speech. So let's take a listen to what the prosecuting lawyer had to say in the courtroom today. He stated, and I quote, "Your Honor, today we are here to show that Simon illegally bought weapons. We have a witness codenamed T5 who is all the way from Nigeria. T5 will testify that Simon sent money to him to buy guns. We have bank statements and other evidence to prove this. This is a serious offense because it's illegal to buy weapons like this, and it's dangerous. Think of it like this. Simon ordered guns online, but instead of a package arriving at his door, the guns were bought by our witness in Nigeria using money Simon sent. We have the receipt to speak, showing that transaction. It's a clear case of illegal weapons purchases. We are confident that the evidence we'll present, including T5's testimony and financial records, will clearly demonstrate Simon's guilt. This isn't just about breaking the law, it's about public safety. We are ready to proceed when you are." So as you can see, this is statements coming from the prosecuting lawyer claiming that Simon purchased or ordered for weapons to be sent to the southeastern region of Nigeria. But instead of these weapons getting to the specific address, an individual, a close friend of Simon, intercepted these weapons. He bought them and he followed suit to do the unimaginable. So let's go back to the courtroom and see the cross-examination between the prosecuting lawyer and this individual, this witness known as T5, who claims to intercept the weapon sent by Mr. Simon. So let's see the conversation between these two parties. So the prosecuting lawyer called upon T5 to take the stance. T5 came into the stance and did all necessary rights needed to do as a witness. So the prosecuting lawyer started his questions by saying, "Good morning, T5. Thank you for being here today. Can you please state your name for the record?" T5 replied by stating his name. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, you have testified that you received money from the defendant, known as Simon. Can you tell us how that money was sent to you?" T5 replied by saying, "Yes. The money came through several wire transfers. I received the money in my bank account." The prosecuting lawyer continued to say, "And did Simon tell you what the money was for?" T5 replied, "Yes, he did. He told me the money was to purchase certain items." The prosecuting lawyer asked, "And what items were you instructed to purchase?" T5 replied, "He told me to buy arms, weapons." The prosecuting lawyer claimed, "Can you describe the specific weapons you were instructed to purchase?" T5 gives clear confirmation of the weapons he was asked to purchase by Mr. Simon. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "Now, let's talk about how you were able to intercept these weapons. Can you explain what happened after you received the money and purchased the weapons?" T5 replied by saying, "After I received the money, I purchased the weapons." The prosecuting lawyer said, "And then what happened? What happened next?" T5 said, "And then I contacted the authorities." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "And why did you contact the authorities?" T5 said, "Because I realized what was happening was wrong. I knew it was illegal and I couldn't let this happen." The prosecuting lawyer said, "So you never delivered these weapons to Simon's men?" T5 replied, "No. I contacted the authorities immediately after the purchase." The lawyer continued by saying, "So you are the reason the weapons never reached Simon's men, is that correct?" T5 said, "Yes, that is absolutely correct." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, can you confirm that you have provided all necessary details to the authorities regarding Simon's transactions and the weapons purchased?" T5 said, "Yes, I have provided all the details to the authorities." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, you have stated that you received the money through wire transfers. Can you tell the court what information was on those transfers?" T5 said, "Yes, the transfers included Simon's name and the amount of money and the date of transfer." The lawyer continued by saying, "And did you have any contact with Simon after the purchase of these weapons?" T5 said, "Yes, I had a brief communication with him." The prosecuting lawyer continued, "And what was the nature of that communication?" T5 said, "I informed him that the purchase was complete and the items were ready for delivery." The prosecuting lawyer continued and said, "And what was his response?" T5 said, "He seemed pleased." The lawyer continued by saying, "Thank you, T5. That's all for now." As you can see, this is a cross-examination between T5 and the prosecuting lawyer. But if you paid attention to this cross-examination, you notice that it doesn't make sense. You notice that there are a lot of mistakes and errors, which definitely is not adding up. And let's see if the judge will somehow, some way pinpoint these errors. Because from the very first glance, we notice that this statement coming from T5 and his lawyer isn't adding up. It doesn't make sense. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what followed suit. Back in the court session, T5 continued when the prosecuting lawyer said, "Okay, I'm done with your cross-examination." T5 continued by saying, "I want to present documents. I want to present series of documents to the courtroom to better buttress my point that Simon really sent money to me." So T5 continued by saying, "Your Honor, members of the jury, I stand before you today not merely as a witness, but as a crucial link in unraveling a dangerous plot. I am here to present the financial records that undeniably prove that the defendant, Simon, paid me to purchase illegal weapons. These documents are not mere copies. They are the original records of the transactions, meticulously preserved to ensure the integrity of this case." T4 went on to bring out some documents, and he continued by saying, "Before you are bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, and digital payment receipts. Each document meticulously details the flow of funds from Simon's account to my own. These records clearly show a series of transactions, precisely timed and directly linked to the purchase of these weapons. The amounts match exactly the invoices I received from the arms dealer. The dates correspond perfectly to the timeline of the purchase, demonstrating a clear and direct connection between the money Simon sent and the weapons acquired." T5 also went a step further to also present all of his documents before the courtroom. He presented series of bank statements, transactional records, and receipts. He claimed that Simon sent these monies to him. At this point, Simon wasn't looking very happy. He wasn't looking so convinced. From his facial expression, one can simply tell that Simon doesn't know T5 in any way, shape, or form, and that's what we think. So Simon asked the judge, "Permit me to speak," and Simon was granted the right. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what Simon had to say. "I, Simon, respectfully request the opportunity to cross-examine the witness known as T5. It is my right to challenge the testimony presented against me, and I believe that the thorough examination of T5's statement is essential for ensuring a fair trial. I would like to address the following points during this cross-examination." And Simon went on to list 5 key points. 5 points he needs clarity from T5. He said, the very first point I need more clarity on is the clarity of transactions. I intend to question T5 about the specifics of the financial transactions, including the exact amounts and dates of the wire transfers mentioned. The second point I will need clarity on is the intent and purpose. I wish to clarify the context in which the money was sent. It is crucial to understand whether T5 had any other intentions or agreements regarding the funds. And the third part is I will need clarity on the credibility of evidence. I will seek to challenge the authenticity of the documents presented by T5, including the bank statements and any other accompanying messages. And the fourth point here is I will need clarity on the communications with authorities. I want to explore T5's interactions with law enforcement and whether any pressure or influence was exerted on them to provide testimony against me. And the fifth point here is I will need clarity on the motivation for testimony. I aim to investigate T5's motivations for coming forward and whether there are any personal interests that may have influenced their testimony. I believe that addressing these points will provide clarity and context to the court regarding the allegations against me. Thank you, my Lord, for considering my request." And this, like I said, is a clear statement coming from Simon asking the judge to grant him permission to cross-examine T5, while using 5 key points as a basis of his questioning. Yes. The following conversations between T5 and Mr. Simon will be very, very interesting. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what follows suit afterwards. At this point, the presiding judge gave Simon the full permission to cross-examine the witness known as T5. So Simon asked, "Good morning, T5. Thank you for being here today. You've testified that I sent you money for the purchase of weapons. Is that correct?" T5 said, "Yes, that's correct." Simon continued by saying, "Let's talk about those transactions. You've presented bank statements. Can you confirm that the account numbers listed on those statements belong to you?" "Yes," replied T5. "They are my accounts." Simon continued and said, "And the name listed on this account, is that your full legal name?" "Yes, it is," replied T5. Simon continued by saying, "Now, regarding the purpose of these transactions, you claim it was for your weapons. Did you and I ever discuss other business ventures?" T5 continued by saying, "Yes, we did." Simon continued, "And were those other ventures discussed through the same channels as the financial transactions?" "Yes," replied T5. Simon said, "So, the method of communication and financial transfers were not exclusively for the purpose of purchasing weapons, is that right?" T5 continued by saying, "Yes, but the context is important." Simon continued by saying, "But the method of communication and the transfers were not exclusively for weapons, correct?" T5 said, "Yes, but..." Simon interrupted him and said, "You received money and you claimed that the money was for weapons. However, you also received money for other purposes, correct?" "Yes," replied T5, "but the messages clearly indicated the purpose." Simon continued by saying, "Let's examine those messages. You've mentioned that these messages were sent with the wire transfers. Are you certain the messages explicitly stated the purpose of weapons?" T5 looked through his document to probably get a response, but Simon continued by saying, "This document you're showing states business investment, doesn't it? Does it mention weapons?" T5 replied by saying, "No, it doesn't showcase any form or any purpose that it was for the purchase of weapons." Simon continued by saying, "T5, you contacted the authorities after receiving this money, correct?" "Yes," replied T5. "Did you discuss this matter with anyone else before contacting with the authorities?" Simon asked. "Yes, I did," said T5. Simon continued by saying, "Did anyone advise you on what to say or how to present the information to the authorities?" T5 said no. Simon continued by saying, "And during those discussions, did you consider the potential consequences of your actions, including the possibility of illegal repercussions?" T5 said, "No, I did not think about it." Simon said, "T5, you've stated that you purchased these weapons. Can you provide proof of this purchase?" "I have the invoices," replied T5. Simon said, "And were these invoices in your name?" "Yes, they were," replied T5. Simon asked, "And you have provided these invoices to the authorities?" "Yes." Simon continued by saying, "T5, you claimed you never delivered these weapons to my boys. Is that correct?" "Yes, that is correct. But you intend to deliver the weapons to my boys. Is that correct?" "Yes," replied T5. Simon said, "Thank you, T5. No further questions at this time." And Simon leaves the stand. If you paid attention to Simon's cross-examination, you will notice that he did not deny meeting with T5, but he's trying to make a point clear that the money that he sent is for a business deal. So let's go back to the courtroom and see the following conversations that played out after Simon cross-examined T5. So back to the courtroom. Before Simon left the stand, he made a very, very emotional speech that was addressed to the presiding judge. Simon stated, and I quote, "Members of the jury, I stand before you today not as a guilty man, but as a victim of a calculated and malicious frame-up. The charges against me are baseless, manufactured, and designed to deceive you. I categorically deny all accusations. This is not a case of illegal weapons purchases. It's a case of deliberate misrepresentation and the abuse of a broken system. The prosecution's star witness, T5, has presented a carefully constructed narrative, but I urge you to look beyond the surface and examine the evidence critically. The financial transactions presented are not evidence of my guilt. They are, in fact, evidence of a complex web of deceit and manipulation. The prosecution's attempt to link these transactions to purchase of illegal weapons is a blatant distortion of the truth. My business dealings with T5 were entirely legitimate, and any suggestion otherwise is a gross misrepresentation. I have never knowingly purchased illegal weapons. I have never knowingly sent illegal weapons to individuals in the southeastern region of Nigeria, and I will never engage in such activities. This case is a testament to the fallibility of the justice system and the ease with which a person can be falsely accused. I urge you to consider the inherent weaknesses in the prosecution's case, the lack of concrete evidence, and the questionable motives of the key witness. I am confident that a thorough examination of all the facts will lead you to one inescapable conclusion. I'm innocent, I'm a victim of conspiracy, and I trust in your judgment to see through this charade and deliver justice. I implore you to find me not guilty. Well, as you can see, this is a very, very emotional speech coming from Simon, addressed to the presiding judge. The presiding judge allowed him to present that speech in the courtroom today. And let's see what followed suit. And let's see other actions that played out after Simon rendered that emotional speech in court. After Simon was done with his speech, the judge continued by saying, "Okay, everyone, I've been listening to the evidence, and honestly, the main witness, T5, hasn't made a very strong case. The things they have said don't really connect very well, and it all feels a bit shaky. Is this really the best the prosecution can do? Because to be frank, it doesn't seem like they have much to back up their claims. If this is all you've got, then it looks like Mr. Simon might actually be innocent. I'm also a bit puzzled why they even brought this witness in. Their testimony hasn't really helped us understand what happened. I'm asking the prosecution why they brought this person in the first place." So as you can see, the judge did not buy up all of the statements and testimonies coming from testifier number 5. And the judge came out to clearly state that if this is what you have against Simon, it's very possible that Simon might be innocent. So let's see what the prosecuting lawyer had to say. Let's see his response to the judge, because the judge asked him a very clear question. If this is all you have to say or do against Mr. Simon, the defendant, let's see what this man, the prosecuting lawyer, have in his pocket. He said, "Your Honor, I appreciate your observations, but T5 testimony is supported by documented evidence reflecting a broader context of illegal activities, and their direct knowledge is crucial for establishing the timeline. We are prepared to present further evidence to reinforce their claims, and we are confident the jury will see the connections and implications." And the judge responded by saying, "I don't want to hear anything coming from this testifier known as T5. I think I've heard a lot from him. This guy don't have anything to present. His evidence doesn't add up. His words doesn't connect, and his claims are too baseless. And I can't sit here and listen to the nonsense coming from your testifier. Do you have somebody else you really want to present to the courtroom today? Do you have a better witness, a better testifier that has something to say, that has tangible things to say?" And the prosecutor lawyer said, "Yes, I have somebody else in my list of testifiers. Yes, I have somebody else, and this happens to be a vigilante officer from the southeastern region of Nigeria. This guy did not travel with T5. In fact, T5 and T6 traveled separately. So the testimonies coming from these two different witnesses are not rehearsed. The testimonies coming from T5 and T6 has no connection. That is to say, these guys haven't met each other before. They haven't had any conversations before. These are two different individuals from two different units in the southeastern region of Nigeria. So permit me to bring up my sixth testifier, known as T6, who, like I said, is a vigilante officer from the southeastern region of Nigeria. Presiding judge said, "Hope your testifier T6 knows what he's about to say. Hope this guy has been briefed on their stance in court. I don't want you to ever bring someone like T5 to the court moving forward. If ever you bring a witness that has a very weak statement, I will suspend you and your witnesses for making statements in the courtroom. I don't want you guys to come here and make up words, make up scenarios in your head. We are trying to seek justice, and we want justice to preside and prevail." And the prosecutor lawyer said, "Yes, I understand, and that is why I have somebody, a vigilante officer, who has a lot of things to say. He has a lot of evidence, facts, and data to back up all of his claims. And please, with your permission, permit me to bring up my sixth testifier." And the presiding judge nodded and said, "Okay, you have the green light. Bring up your testifier number 6 and let's see what he has to say and claim. T6 was brought into the stand. He did all necessary rights needed to be done as the testifier, and he was ready for cross-examination by the prosecuting lawyer. After T6 did all necessary rights needed to be done as a testifier, the prosecuting lawyer asked T6, "Officer, could you please state your full name and current occupation for the record?" Mr. T6 gave his full name and also claimed that, "I am a vigilante officer in a specific region in the southeastern region of Nigeria." The prosecutor asked, "Officer, can you describe the situation in your region during the time or the period in which Simon's social media posts were active?" T6 replied by saying the region was experiencing significant unrest. There were protests, clashes, and a general atmosphere of fear and instability. Many lives were lost, and the community was deeply affected. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "And did you personally observe or experience any of this unrest?" T6 replied by saying, "Yes, I did. I was on the ground daily, working to maintain order and protect my community." The prosecuting lawyer said, "Now, officer, you mentioned Mr. Simon's social media post. Can you describe what you observed regarding this post?" T6 said, "I observed that Mr. Simon's post was widely shared and discussed within the community. They were filled with inflammatory languages like calls to action and often targeted specific groups of individuals." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "Can you give us some specific examples of the languages used in this post?" T6 provided all of the languages and the tones Mr. Simon used during his social media post.
Breaking news. IPOB raised Gowon over alleged insult, insensitive remark on unity and Biafran genocide. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wonderful people, also of freedom all over the world. Wherever you are joining us from today, you're highly welcome to this wonderful YouTube platform that continues to give you all the updated news and information. Now, the press statement by Èkpá Powerful, the spokesperson for the indigenous people of Biafra, has actually, caused mixed reaction both in Biafran land and in the zoo. Now, let us hear the press statement. The indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, under the leadership of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, vehemently condemns the recent statement by General Yakubu Gowon, former Nigerian head of state, describing his remarks as a provocative, insensitive, and shameless attempt to whitewash the atrocities of the Biafran genocide he orchestrated. His claim that the Nigerian civil war was fought for unity, not hatred, is not only a grotesque distortion of history, but a deliberate insult to the millions of Biafrans slaughtered under the command and an affront to all victims of his premeditated genocidal campaigns. We continue. Gowon's crocodile tears over the violence in Jos and his hollow lamentation about Nigerian disunity cannot erase the bloodstains on his hands. His words are a painful reminder of the unrepentant arrogance of a man who presided over the massacre of over 5 million Biafran women, men, and children whose only crime was seeking self-determination in the face of systematic marginalization and state-sponsored pogrom. To compare his genocidal war to a quest for unity is to spit on the graves of our ancestors and mock the suffering of survivors. Gowon's legacy is not one of unity, but of unparalleled brutality, second only to Adolf Hitler's slaughter of 6 million Jews. He demands that Gowon answer the following question, which he has dodged for decades. What happened at Aburi? Why did you renege on the agreement reached with Dim Chukwuemeka Odumogwu Ojukwu, which could have averted the war? Why did you repeatedly seek guidance from a certain diplomat during those negotiations betraying Nigeria's sovereignty to neo-colonial interests? Why did you perpetuate the falsehood that the January 1966 coup was an Igbo plot, when evidence clearly shows it was a military action by officers from across Nigeria? Why did you refuse to return Nigeria to regionalism, a system that fostered unprecedented economic growth in favor of a unitary structure designed to exploit Biafran's oil and gas resources? What transpired during the late Sir Ahmadu Bello's visit to Sansot, where he addressed Nigerian cadets in Hausa, sowing seeds of division? As a self-proclaimed born-again Christian, why have you refused to publish your account of the Aburi Accord? What truth are you afraid to reveal to posterity? Gowon's periodic speeches are not calls for healing, but deliberate provocations that reopen old wounds. His refusal to acknowledge the truth about the Biafran genocide, starvation policies, mass execution, and area bombardment of civilian population demonstrates his lack of remorse. Unity cannot be imposed by force, nor can it thrive in a contraption like Nigeria, an artificial creation designed by colonial masters to exploit indigenous ethnic nationalities. The diverse culture and worldviews of Nigerians people are irreconcilable under a forced union that prioritizes the interests of a few over the aspiration of many. Now, before we continue, in this press statement, it is always good, to clarify your stance in some certain issues. I saw the statement of Gowon, not just the statement alone, but the claim that the general who caused the massacre of over 5 million Biafran men, women, children, and which led to a lot of genocidal attack, can come out to twist a WAR that was led by you and that caused a lot of attack and genocide in Biafran land. You're twisting it in your own favor, and yet you claim to be a born-again Christian, in as much as I don't want to talk about that. After massacring innocent people, you want to still twist the history. I've said this thing times without number. It is high time Biafran fathers start teaching their children the history. Let the young one learn the history of Biafran, not what they are being told. If not, these atrocious people will make you believe in something that doesn't exist. It is better you learn the Biafran history. Don't get carried away by these people, by international communities, by what the United Kingdom tells you about Biafra, by what the zoo tells you about Biafra. If not, you will swallow whatever they give to you, hook, line, and sinker, without even thinking twice. We all are seeing what they are trying to do. Ibrahim Babangida did his own. They are just creating a kind of false history in their own favor, so that they can actually appear as the heroes and not the villain. But we know what is happening because we have actually, read our history, and we know how a lot of innocent Biafrans, were massacred by these people, the zoo. Let us round up with the press release. To Gowon and his ilk, we say, your generation failed to build a foundation for meaningful development or coexistence. Your actions sowed the seed of discord that Nigeria reaps today. Spare us your sanctimonious rhetoric about unity. The blood of 5 million Biafran cries out for justice, and no amount of media posturing can silence their voices. If you seek peaceful coexistence, let your action, not empty words, prove it. Begin by telling the world how you sleep at night after superintending one of history's worst atrocities. IPOB remains resolute in our pursuit of self-determination for Biafra. We call on all Biafrans, both at home and in diaspora, to reject Gowon's revisionist narrative and unite in our quest for freedom. Nigeria's unity is a myth sustained by coercion and exploitation. The time for truth, justice, and liberation is now, and that is, the statement, disregarding that claim by the so-called General Yakubu Gowon. Thank you once again for joining us on today. You've actually heard the press statement, from the indigenous people of Biafran, spokesperson Èkpá Powerful. Most times, Èkpá Powerful speaks right, but we know that most times when it comes to, making some silly remarks, that doesn't really, add up, he messes up. But this one, he did well by clarifying the atrocious things, being committed by General Yakubu Gowon. Thank you once again for joining us. Do not forget to share this video to as many groups and platforms as possible. God bless you.